So we are just beginning our live stream on YouTube for what is our second installment of Chasing Lullabies, which is really an exciting endeavor that we are all going through together. The stream on YouTube has just begun.
Right.
Okay, so I want to reintroduce you to our friend over here, just to remind us of the mission that we're on. So I want to reintroduce you.
Why do you always sit yourself outside?
I'm just going to mute everybody. So I want to reintroduce you to Jemima. Jemima here. I didn't actually give you her name last week, but Jemima was our object of focus at the beginning of last week's Chasing Lullaby session. Jemima is a little bit cheeky. She does like to wave at you. And so Jemima was our little baby who we rocked to sleep with the lullaby. Rockabye baby on the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock. When the bough breaks, the cradle will fall, and down will come baby, baby and all. And we realized that lullaby is a very strange one because it talks about Jemima, unfortunately, no longer being with us as she falls out of the tree and smashes her poor little brain on the rocks beneath. And we realized that therefore we sometimes engage with certain pieces of text or certain material like a lullaby. It's called the lullaby effect, whereby we don't think about it anymore. We simply allow it to wash over us in a haze of treacle-filled wonder, whereby we no longer allow our brains to connect, and we just listen. So that unfortunately seems to be the way that we engage with Torah a lot of the time, that our Torah stories are simply these lullabies that wash over us, and we've had so many stories and sound bites surrounding them that we no longer engage with them meaningfully. I'm not going to give this spiel at the beginning of every session, but since it's only our second session of Chasing Lullabies, I thought I'd rehash the key components. And so therefore the idea of this program is and this learning that we're going to do together and that we're going to share is to try and look at text in a new way, a fresh way, to open up a text with questions. And last time we defined really three different types of question. There would be an internal question, which is a question about the text itself. So what's going on between, why does it say this and not say that? What is the meaning of this passage juxtaposed to that passage? It's kind of maybe what we might associate with sort of very old, what we might associate with old-fashioned sort of Torah learning, the kind of the nitty-gritty of textual analysis. And it certainly has its place. And actually, spoiler alert, tonight we are going to be doing quite a lot of internal questions. And I want us to almost challenge that feeling that whenever we have these very nitty-gritty internal questions, all we're going to be met with is some sort of technical answer that has no bearing on our life and no relevance to our learning. So I'd like us to try to debunk that myth this evening, but we'll see if we can debunk a few more as well. So that's an internal question, a question about the text, a question about why it's written in this way. Just as an aside, because we are going to be focusing on internal questions this evening, why does an internal question matter? For example, I don't pick up a novel by, say, Terry Pratchett and wonder why he said "and" in this position as opposed to "but." I don't look at his interesting use of conjunctions or suffixes in the third chapter of the Light Fantastic. So why is it that we do such textual analysis? And possibly even when I was doing my English Lit GCSE, so I don't necessarily know if we were going through Shakespeare or Sassoon or any of the others, Lahavdil, or whatever, with such a fine-tooth comb as we do with the Torah. And the answer that we have is that there was no mere human author to the Torah, despite certain popular positions nowadays. We understand that this is a divine document. It was written by God. So God has has a harder kind of, I suppose, standard to follow, or for us to learn from, because if he's writing the book, so then every word, every letter is important. It's for a purpose, it's for a reason, and the reason is for us to gain insights from and for us to glean what deep messages there can be. So when we're faced with an internal question in the Torah. It's not simply a question of literature or style. It's a question of message and meaning. So that's the power of an internal question. An external question is a different type of question. It's what arises from the text, kind of the deeper, the more global questions that arise from this. So an example that we gave last week was we were talking about the story of Noah and the flood. So an internal question is why Noah is called righteous in his generation. Why does it say in his generation? What is God, the author, trying to add when he writes in his generation rather than just saying he's righteous? But an external question is, why would God create a project called the universe or the world or Earth or humanity or animal species, and then decide to end that project rather prematurely? Or if he does decide to end the project, well, why save the last vestiges? Why not wipe everything away and start it again? So what's going on with this plan business? It seems like it's neither here nor there. It's neither reverting to a new or holding on to the old. So what's going on? That's an external question. It's a question that arises from the text, but it's not in the text itself. It's not in the words. It's what comes from the concepts of the words. And then we have reflective questions, which I think are really important because they are about how we feel about the text. And sometimes we don't allow feelings in. We don't allow us to really resonate and grapple with the text. And I think that the text that we're going to be dealing with tonight and the characters that we're going to be dealing with tonight will be quite triggering for many of us. And the concepts will be quite triggering. And so I want us to bear in mind how we feel about the stories tonight. And we'll try and keep that in mind as we go through. So to begin this evening's presentation, I want to ask maybe a slightly controversial question. Feel free to unmute yourself to answer it, and then just to mute afterwards so that we can hear everybody else without interference from the background. But maybe this is a can of worms question, but the question is as follows. What do you find to be the most boring and irrelevant parts of the Torah? If you had to choose a certain passage or a certain type of passage, certain narrative or not, what for you would be the most boring / irrelevant? And there might be two different things, boring and irrelevant, but let's just try and bosh them together. Something which really doesn't seem to have any meaning or value for you. Don't all fire away at once.
Okay, I'll jump in.
Go on, Daniel.
I'd say anything that doesn't have a relevance to how I could live my day-to-day life as a better human being.
Okay. Do you have any particular examples in mind?
Not really.
Okay. Should I give one to you? Maybe just as a suggestion.
Sure.
What about animal sacrifices? How do you feel about those?
I wouldn't do them, but I guess it teaches you more generally about animal welfare and how to treat animals better and how we've developed as a society.
Okay, I'll take that. But so Daniel's saying anything that's not really directly relevant to living a better life. We couldn't find necessarily a particular example, but that felt like it's not so relevant and it's boring. It doesn't speak to me.
As a history buff, I find the parts that don't actually follow the narrative of the Bnei Yisrael and them leaving and how they get from Egypt to Eretz Yisrael, I find difficult. I wouldn't say boring, but difficult. I like to study the narrative and the history of how they got from one part to the next, but I find the other bits more challenging.
Okay, so Penny likes the stories but doesn't like the laws.
No, I like the history.
The history component.
But I find the laws themselves I find difficult to. What's the word? Process? That's the word.
Fantastic. So that's great. So, that's great. So the story and the way that it's telling us the story of humanity from the creation of man and of Adam and Eve, and all the way through to the forefathers leaving Egypt, going through to the promised land. That's great, but the bits in between, the chunks of law, those are maybe a bit tricky. Fine. Thank you, Penny. Anyone else?
How about long lists of names?
Amazing. Who said that? Sorry, I'm flicking through.
Jonathan Century.
Jonathan, amazing. Jonathan, the long lists of names. That's right, the genealogical lists that we find in the Torah, right? And Adam begat he, begat Seth, and Seth begat this and that. So loads of begats, names, genealogy. Art Scroll loves it because they get to do charts in the Chumash, and that's very exciting when you open a Chumash. There's a genealogical chart in it. But you're right that it does feel like lists of names are meaningless or very boring, very dull. It's quite tricky for the person laning it at times because the names can be quite elaborate and rare. And so if anyone has been laning the Torah during any of those parashiot with long lists of names, that provides a certain interest and a certain difference. But other than that, you're right, it does feel like it's very dry and not particularly meaningful.
Speaking as a genealogist, Rabbi, I hate to disagree with that. I love those lists of names.
Amazing. Fine. So I'm glad that we have two opinions this evening, because it is a list of names or a list of genealogy that I'd like us to look at this evening and almost try and hold up that theory to scrutiny, or that issue to scrutiny. Is it true that the long list of names are not replete with meaning and not full of interest? We find in the Torah portion that we would have been reading this week had we been in shul. And just once again, before we really jump into the investigation, I want to shout out to aleph-beta.org and Rabbi Foreman and his team.
Can I ask
some of the material for tonight? Yes, was that?
Yeah, me, Harvey.
Hi, Harvey.
I'm surprised you asked the question when we are told that no word in the Torah is wasted.
Right. So that's what I said about.
Why are you asking the question?
No, so we have to hold that up as a piece of knowledge, Harvey, that that every word in the Torah is incredibly important, but we have to wonder how to get that importance out. So it's very nice to know it's important. It's another thing to extract its importance and hold on to it. So I'm with you, Harvey, but we have to demonstrate that. So let's see if we can do some of that this evening. And so I'm going to show you a passage from the Torah portion that we would have been reading in shul this evening, and I want to open up this passage with questions. So first, I'll just share the screen with you to show you the passage, and then and I'll read it through, and then we're going to be open up the floor to try and interrogate this text a little bit. I hope everyone can see. Could one person let me know if they can see the passage? Yeah, you can see it. Great. So here we go. So this is in this week's Torah portion. It's the beginning of the book of Numbers. We are in chapter 3, verses 1 to 4. And here we go. Ve'ela toldos Aharon Moshe. These are the children, literally, or the descendants of Aaron and Moses, the two brothers who are the heroes of the Exodus story. V'yoim diber Hashem es Moshe b'har Sinai. On the day that Hashem spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai. Okay. Ve'ela shemos b'nei Aharon, and these are the names of the children of Aaron. Habachor, the firstborn Nadav, Avihu and Avihu, Elazar, Nadav's son, the Isamar and Itamar. So 4 sons, Nadav, Avihu, Elazar and Itamar. Eila shemos b'nei Aharon, these are the names of the children of Aaron, HaKohanim, the priests, Hamashruchim, which is the anointed ones, Asher mile yodom lechahen, literally, whose hands were filled to serve as priests, to be priests, or were consecrated as priests. Vayomos Nadav va'avihu lifnei Hashem, and Nadav and Avihu died before God, Bahak krivam eish zara lifnei Hashem, when they brought a strange fire in front of God, Bamidbar Sinai, in the Sinai desert, uvonim lo hayu lahem, and sons they did not have. Vaychahen Elazar v'isamar, and Elazar and Itamar served as priests, al pnei Aharon avihem, in front of Aaron their father. Okay, so I would like us now to just pull back from this text. We've seen this text probably many times in our life, probably skipped over it, possibly with Jonathan's welcome engaged in a certain act of ignoring the text, not ignoring the text, but recognizing that this isn't going to be so relevant to me. It's just a list of names, and so we switch off. So I'd like us to kind of just switch on and almost have those fresh glasses that we've never seen this text before, and just ask questions that need to be asked about it. Put it apart. Challenge anything that is there. And no question is a bad question. No question is a stupid question. Let's see what we can do to start to open up this text. So just unmute yourself when you're ready and throw out a question.
Rabbi, what do they mean by strange fire?
What do they mean by strange fire? So that's just
there's no commentary. I need to ask the question.
Sure. So there's the story that is being referred to here with Nadav and Avihu is a story back in the book of Leviticus.
Yeah, I remember, but I don't know what they mean by strange fire.
Right. So there's different commentaries there. Essentially, it's a fire that wasn't commanded, that they were not asked to bring their fire pans with their fire offerings into the temple. Instead, this was done of their own accord, of their own volition.
They went in unsolicited. Yeah.
That's right. So that's the strangeness of the fire.
Something very simple. Can you just say, is there any reason why the English first line, Moses and Aaron, are transposed Ivrit with the Hebrew?
Sorry, what was that?
Why is the first line the descendants of Moses and Aaron, and in the Hebrew it says the descendants of Aaron and Moshe?
Yeah, that's just a poor translation.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
must be art scroll.
But whilst you thank you, Harvey. Whilst you're there, Harvey, yeah, what do you notice about the list? What do you notice about that introduction that doesn't seem to be borne out?
Well, they're saying that these are the descendants of Moses and Aaron on the day that the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai.
Yes.
So why are they talking about Nadav and Avihu, who had died before this point? So if they're talking about the descendants, at that point.
Yeah.
And what about little Gershon? He hasn't been mentioned either.
Right, so that's great. Okay, so Penny and Susie have just spoken out two amazing questions on this text, and I'm just going to pause for a second and we're going to pull those out. So Susie began by saying, there's an interesting specification in verse 1. It says, these are the descendants on the day that God spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai. Now, why do we need, what is the relevance of being told in a genealogical list the day that they were their descendants? So were they all given birth to on that day? All the Aaron's wife had 4 kids on that day, and they were called Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, and Itamar. No, we know that Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, and Itamar were adults. They were present at the giving of the Torah. They died later on. They were present at Har Sinai. Later on, the Mishkan was constructed, the tabernacle was constructed, and then they died on the day that the tabernacle was consecrated. So they died later, but they were adults on the day that the Torah was given. So why are we specifying that this day, the day of Mount Sinai, is the day of them being descendants? They were descendants already prior to Mount Sinai. They were descendants on the day Yocheved, Aaron's wife, gave birth to them well before Mount Sinai. So the first question is, what does the day of Mount Sinai have to do with the question? And then Penny asked a great question. She said, hold on a second. We've been talking about Aaron's sons and Aaron's sons. And that's great. He had 4 sons. Lovely boys, I'm sure. Hope they find a nice shidduch.
Okay.
But we haven't spoken about Moshe's sons. And actually, I mean, as an aside, Moshe's sons get a bit of an interesting get a short thrift in the Torah, because despite the Hasidic dynasties of today, when it goes father, son, Moshe's dynasty was not continued by his sons Gershon and Eliezer. It went on to, as we know, we went on to Joshua. But he had 2 sons. So if we are beginning with the title, these are the kids of Moses and Aaron, who have we missed out the list? We've missed out of the list Moshe's sons, Gershon and Eliezer. So those are 2 great questions, and I would like possibly to have 2 more, please.
You've missed out Miriam as well, Rabbi.
Pardon?
Honestly, they missed out Miriam as well.
But Moshe married a Midianite.
That's true.
The other thing I've noticed here is that what confuses me is that when did the two sons die? Before or after Sinai?
They died after Sinai because just the order of events. Just a little.
Why does it say they died in the past tense?
That's a great question. So just to bring you through the chronology, let's say Exodus, Sinai, construction of the tabernacle, tabernacle's inauguration, and the death of Aaron's first two sons, and then today, or rather this week's parasha, which stands after that whole saga. So we've had already Exodus, then we had the giving of the Torah at Sinai, then we had the construction of the tabernacle, and then we had the inauguration of the tabernacle and the death of the sons, and then we have the count at the very end of that.
So it's referring to the past in a sense.
That's right. It happened. It already happened at that point in the narrative. Yeah. Great question.
And which are the 40 days? Moses was speaking with God for 40 days, not just for one day.
Right, but I suppose the day that they spoke at Mount Sinai is the day that they all had that mass revelation. So day one of that. Yeah.
Can I ask a question, Rabbi? Oh, go on. Sorry.
Rabbi, in the beginning, it's talking about the descendants of both Moshe and Aaron.
Yeah.
But by the end, it's just saying in the presence of Aaron. It doesn't.
Right. So we have this. We're only talking about Aaron's sons. We're not talking about Moshe's sons. So what happened to Moshe's sons? Where did they get left out? Great. Yeah. Good. That's a good question.
Because they didn't become Kohanim.
No, they didn't.
Simon?
I mean, Moshe, was he a Kohen? He wasn't a Kohen.
Right. He wasn't. That was Aaron was the Kohen.
Moshe was a Levite.
Right.
Levite, like me.
Right. So we've got a few more questions to ask, a couple more questions to ask on this text, and then we're going to try and answer them. So
just, can I ask, Rabbi?
Yes, Simon.
Yeah. So just looking at verse 4. So there's I would question why there's a repetition of before the Lord. So they died before the Lord and they brought a fire before the Lord.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure why there's repetition there. And then following on from that, it's and they had no children, whereas you would expect it to be that's why they had no children.
Right. Well,
so they could have
had children before this event.
Yes, but then why mention it? It seems that they're connected but unconnected.
That's true. And there is actually there is some talk about the fact that they were unmarried and therefore that led to a certain level of inexperience.
Right. But it doesn't mention Eleazar and Ithamar not having children.
That's right.
So it would seem to imply that it's dying before the Lord because of the alien fire before the Lord that caused them not to have children, but it doesn't implicitly say that.
Yeah. And I'm with you on all these questions, and I just want to also focus on something that is kind of implicit in everything you're saying, is that if I have a genealogical list, why do I need to mention the cause of their death? I mean, I think there's loads of things to learn about that episode in Parashat Shmini in the previous book of the Torah, but in terms of the actual relevance to this particular passage, why talk about it? Why talk about the Eish Lara, the foreign fire? Why talk about any ramifications of them therefore not having children? Simply just say that they died and they didn't have, and if you want to say they didn't have children, that's fine, but don't bring about the whole sad story of the cause of their death. We know what happened, we dealt with it over there, and we can leave it to be. If it's simply a genealogical list, we don't need cause of death, we just need to know death and progeny or lack of. So I think therefore there's a question in here which is what is the purpose, what's the function of that story in this list? And maybe one more question, which is really technical, and it's very similar to one that Simon just asked, which is about unnecessary repetition. But if you look at verse 2 and verse 3, they seem to be very, very similar. Verse 2 says, Ve'ele shmos b'nei Aaron, these are the names of the children of Aaron. And verse 3, without the vav, without the and, but still says, Eile shmos b'nei Aaron, these are the names of the children of Aaron. So why do we have a repetition? These are the names. We already know, and again, these are the names of the children of Aaron, and we give their 4 names, and then we should be able to move on. How much these, and they are the priests, the anointed ones. Why do we need to know that these are the names again? So if we were to stop the screen share and write up in the group chat just the 4 questions. We have one question, which is, where are Moses' children? We have the second question, which is, what is the relevance, or what is the relevance of the giving of the day of the giving of the Torah? Okay, I hope if you see the chat, it's just appearing at the bottom. The third question is the repetition of these are the names. And then the 4th question is why refer back to the cause of death of Nadav and Avihu. Okay. So those are the 4 questions that we've come up with on this. But just again, a note, these are all internal questions. They're very kind of localized, textual questions. It can feel quite dry. So I want you to challenge yourselves and to go through with me, because I think it's going to get very exciting very soon. And as we do this, we're going to have to look at a piece of Rashi, because he is going to start to help us with this passage, because
Lullabies.
So he's going to help us with this passage, because he himself, Rashi, was very bothered by that question which we began with, which is where are Moses' children? Where are Moshe's children? Where's Gershon and Eliezer? Where are they in this list? And so Rashi says like this, and I'm just going to show you again that Rashi inside, because I think when we learn things like this, we should see the original text. And he himself, Rashi, is quoting from a medrash, about this episode. So here's the screen share, hopefully. Is that screen sharing? Is that screen sharing? Yeah? No? Is it screen sharing? Yeah? Good. Okay, so here's Rashi. And he says, Ve'ele toldos Aaron and Moshe, ve'eno mazkir ele b'nei Aaron, and it only mentions the children of Aaron. So where are Moshe's children? So it says, V'nikru toldos Moshe, they're called the children of Moshe, lefi shelamdam Torah, because he taught them Torah. What's the point? Melamed, that comes to teach us, shekol ha-melamed as ben chavero Torah, that comes to teach us that anyone who teaches the child of someone else Torah, ma'ale olav kakosov ki'ilu yaldoi. The verse considers it as if they have given birth to that person. So just kind of as a personal aside, one of the most painful parts, not painful, that sounds awful, but one of the most painful parts of leaving Israel just now was leaving not my flesh and blood father, actually one of the nicest parts of coming back to England, other than being here with you amazing people and joining this wonderful community, which has only shown its true colors, the beautiful warmth that it has under these trying times. But one of the lovely things also is that my dad and my mum are down the road. And so it's an amazing thing to come back to my dad and my mum. But one of the painful things was leaving a person who was also like a father to me, not because he gave birth to me, but because he taught me Torah for the past 3 years and gave me a real mission in life and gave me a huge amount of warmth. And I'm still very, very fortunate to be able to speak to him on a weekly basis. And that's my Rabbi Berkovitz in Jerusalem, that that there's a pain of separation. So there's this statement that Rashi is giving us, that the reason that we are mentioning Aaron's sons as Moshe's children almost is because even though Moshe did not provide the genetic material for these boys, for these men, Moshe provided the spiritual growth or building blocks for these people, for these men, and that allows them to be his sons.
But it doesn't explain why his own sons are missing from that, though.
So didn't Moshe teach his own sons Torah? Oh, the Torah wasn't there yet, but...
So Sodi's asking a question, which is, didn't Moshe teach his own sons? That's and then Jeff was asking a question. What was Jeff's question?
Is that Rashi doesn't explain why Gershon and his other son wasn't mentioned.
So you're right. So currently what this Rashi is telling us is to justify why the list of Aaron's family includes Moshe as a father figure. Why is Moshe a father figure in this list? So ultimately, apparently, this list, its function is to list the genealogy of the priests. It's not there to list the genealogy of Moshe. It's there to, but the priests, or the priest's sons, had another father. They had two fathers. They had a genetic father and a spiritual father, or an additional spiritual father, because I'm sure Aaron taught his own sons Torah, but they have an additional spiritual father, Moshe. Now, that's a beautiful idea, by the way. It's a beautiful idea that we should just hold on to for a second, which is that when a person teaches someone else, it's almost like one is engaging in a father-child relationship. And anyone who's ever influenced someone else, anyone who's ever been in that position to teach Torah, or will know what it's like to take that role. I'm just thinking about some of the bar mitzvah boys that I used to teach, and now I'm blessed to teach here in Barnet. And it's an amazing place to be, where you can give something so powerful, something so meaningful. You can give the light of Torah to another human being, whether that human being is your own child or someone else's child. It almost doesn't matter. You are nourishing them with the sustenance of life. And when I used to I taught, there's a family of 3 boys in Kingston who are growing up, Baruch Hashem, and I started with their oldest son, and over the course of a year, we learned together, we investigated together, we questioned together, and towards the end of that year, he started to get really interested in tefillin and engaging with a minyan in Kingston on a Sunday morning. Every Sunday morning, I used to pick him up first thing, and then I take him to shul, and we'd lay tefillin together, and we'd have breakfast together, and we'd learn together after breakfast before Cheder. By the way, there's still Chedorim in the world, and there's no Jewish schools enough, or not enough Jewish schools in South London to take away that need for Chedorim. Anyway, and then his brother came along, and then I started learning with his brother, and then the youngest one's having his bar mitzvah in a couple of months on Zoom. And it's an amazing thing. You feel like you're a part of the family. They have a father, and I love their father, and I'm also somehow involved in their spiritual growth. And anyone who's ever had a teacher will also know what it's like to receive the lessons from an amazing teacher. You feel a connection. I was talking about my own teacher, but anyone who's had a teacher or a guide or a mentor, whether that's even if it's not in the world of Torah, someone who's looked after you in the business or in the firm or at university, right? A supervisor. Well, anyone who's done a thesis or a dissertation will know what it's like to have a person looking out for them, to nourishing them, nurturing them. So that's what the Rashi is telling us, that Moshe took that role in the lives of the sons of Aaron. So I want to hold on to the importance of that message, but I have a question, and there's kind of a knockout question to this Rashi, and I wonder if
let's say something briefly.
Yeah.
In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Moshe regarded as our father as well in some ways?
So that's I think the knockout question there, Martin, which is that we refer to Moshe as Moshe Rabbeinu. Rabbeinu, right? So Moshe is Moshe Rabbeinu. He's our teacher. That means that Moshe is the teacher of all Jews, all of them. And if you think about it, what was making Moshe the teacher? What was making Moshe the teacher was the fact that he was the one to bring the Torah down from Mount Sinai, from God, inscribed at Mount Sinai, written down at Mount Sinai, and give it to the nation. So, was he only the father of these 4 people, of Nadav, Avihu, Elazar, and Itamar? No, he was the father, the spiritual father of the entire nation, about 3 million people. You're going to tell me that justifies the position of Moshe in this verse? How do we make sense of that? He was there by that kind of logic. We should have 3 million names in this passage, not simply 4 names in this passage. So whilst the Rashi has given us a lovely medrash and a lovely insight, we still need to work it through how it's relevant here.
That's not entirely true, Rabbi, if you were to take it in isolation, because it could be that every passage that lists genealogy starts with these are the sons of whoever and Moshe.
So that would be true if that was the case, but I'm going to give you a sneak preview that it doesn't begin with and Moshe in the other cases. So you're right, Simon, that we could test the data for an alternative hypothesis, but I'm going to float to you a hypothesis here, which will just give you a different sense of that, which is that maybe you're right that as on a broad level, Moshe is our teacher. He's Moshe Rabbeinu, and he taught all of us, and so we all have equal rights to call him our father. But there might have been two people who were particularly moved by Moshe, so much so that he wasn't just the general father of the entire nation, and they weren't just part of that general grouping of his students, but they became almost like prime disciples to this person, to this teacher. And they were so moved by him that gave them forever in the Torah the mantle of being his children. And who might these two people be? I'm going to suggest that these two people are Nadav and Avihu. Why? Because these were the two people that are being separated out in this verse for a particular event. So let's see if I can float the theory to you and see what you think about it. And the theory goes like this. Let's suppose that Nadav and Avihu saw something on a particular day. What day did they see something very special about Moshe? Well, it's the day that this verse 1, begins with. It was our question 2 in the chat, which is, what is the relevance of the day of the giving of the Torah? Something very, very magnificent happened on the day of the giving of the Torah to their teacher. So what happened on the day of the giving of the Torah to their teacher?
He saw the face of, not the face of God, the back of God.
He descends with the huge glow of light casting out of his face.
That's right. That's right. What is sometimes translated as the horns, right? That's why the karne or, the horns of light, literally the rays of light that shone out from Moshe, which is sometimes translated as horns, and that's why there's an amazing Borat sketch when he goes to the Midwest and finds people believing that Jews have horns. And actually, it's not so strange that in Kingston, every week we used to have school children coming into the shul, and that was a service that we offered to the wider community, that any school children that wanted to find out about Judaism would visit the synagogue and find out about it. And one of my predecessors was asked whether he hides his horns under his kippah. In any case,
There's a statue of Moshe Rabbeinu in Bern. In Bern,
right, with the horns. That's right. And Rabbi Feldman wrote an article about that in Daf HaShavua a few years ago, with a picture of that statue. But I don't want to get too sidetracked with horns. But the point is that on that day, actually, he came down with his horns of light, his rays of light at the end of the period. But what Nadav and Avihu saw, they saw Moshe ascend the mountain, and they saw a cloud come down upon the mountain, and they saw their teacher engage in what was the closest relationship, the closest discussion or discourse that a human being has ever had with the Almighty, with the infinite creator of all. And if I'm just going to show you one more screen share, I always say one more screen share, and it's always more than one more screen share, but let's just go back to some text, which is, first of all, the original text. That it says over here, B'yom diber Hashem es Moshe. Normally we translate that as on the day that God spoke es Moshe to Moshe Bahar Sinai. Well, es is these two words, aleph and sof, or for those of you who are more Sephardic, aleph and taf. So the et. So this word et in the Torah actually has about 5 different functions. And I had the privilege of being taught by a man in Israel called Nachman Markuson, who has a guide to mastering biblical Hebrew. And in this guide, he has about 5 different usages that the Torah has of the word es. And would you believe it, that es doesn't always mean to, it also means with. So we could retranslate this verse as B'yom diber Hashem es Moshe, on the day that God spoke with Moses. He spoke with him as a partner, as almost like a confidant. And Nadav and Avihu saw their teacher achieving the greatest heights of connection, and they wanted to emulate their teacher. And so what did they do? So just moving down, they take their fire pan. And let's read that passage and see if this passage, which talks from the Parashat Shmini in the book of Leviticus, in the previous book of the Torah. Let's see if when we read this passage, when it talks about what they were trying to do, let's see if we hear any echoes of somewhere else, something else. It's almost like a game. Where have you heard this before? So Vayavo Moshe v'Aaron, and Moses and Aaron came El Ohel Moed into the tent of meeting. Vayetzu, and they came out. Vayvaruchu es ha'am, and they blessed the nation. Vayira kavod Hashem el kol ha'am, and the honor or the glory of Hashem appeared, was seen to all the people. Vayikchu bnei Aaron Nadav v'Avihu, and the sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, they took ish machtasoi, they took each man his fire pan. Vayitnu vahen eish, and they placed into it fire. Vayasimu aleha kotores, and they put into it incense. Vayakrivu lifnei Hashem eish zara asher lo tziva osam, and they brought in close to God a foreign fire that was not commanded of them. Vatete eish lifnei Hashem, and a fire came out from Hashem, vatochel osam, and it consumed them. Vayamusu, and they died lifnei Hashem before God. I have quite a few lifnei Hashems, which is also something that Simon noticed about the verses that we were looking at. So that seems to be something which is stressed each time the story is told. But I wonder, what is it reminiscent of, this tent of meeting, this this situation? And maybe we can just come down one more time to the punchline, which is, I'm going to jump to it over here, which is that Mount Sinai, the story of Mount Sinai, the story of the giving of the Torah, and the story of the Mishkan have uncanny similarities. The story of the tabernacle. So it says over here, Vayal Moshe el Hahar, Moshe went up to the mountain, Vachas he'anon es Hahar, and the cloud covered the mountain. When describing the tabernacle, Vachas he'anon es Ohel Moed, the cloud of God covered the tent of meeting. So in the Mount Sinai story, we've got the cloud covering the mountain. In the Mishkan story, in the tabernacle story, we've got the cloud covering the Mishkan. Okay. Vayishkon, and it continues in the Mount Sinai story. Vayishkon kvod Hashem al har Sinai, and the glory of God rested or dwelled on Mount Sinai. And in the Mishkan story, kvod Adonai, the glory of God, malei as the Mishkan, filled the Mishkan. The similarity one, cloud of God. Similarity two, glory filling this location. Okay. Similarity number three, umarei kvod Hashem, and the appearance of the honor, the glory of God, ke'esh ocheles, like consuming fire, barosh hahar, on the top of the mountain. And in what form did God's presence appear to the children of Israel above the tabernacle? Anan Hashem ala Mishkan, the cloud of God was on top of the Mishkan, Yomam, during the day, and in the night, a fire was at night. So similarity number three, a fire on Mount Sinai, a fire on the tabernacle. And in what way did this relate to everybody else? Le'enei b'nei Israel, in front of the eyes of the children of Israel, Mount Sinai was a public demonstration to all. And in the tabernacle also, le'enei kol b'nei Israel, in the eyes of all of the children of Israel. So we now have four similarities between the Mount Sinai story and the tabernacle story. So we're being told something very powerful, my friends. We've been told that there was something about something about the tabernacle which was mirroring Mount Sinai. That Mount Sinai was being beamed down somehow. That experience of giving the Torah, of a relationship with God, was being beamed into the tabernacle. And so let's put these ideas together and answer our four questions. You had two people who were profoundly affected by their teacher. You had Nadav and Avihu, two people who were so profoundly affected by their teacher and his experience. What was his experience? That he had gone and spoken with Hashem. He had been able to encounter the divine, achieved a spiritual height unlike any other. And so they, on the day that experience was once again reignited, when the tabernacle was built and Mount Sinai was now beamed into the encampment with the same symbolism, the same cloud, the same fire, the same presence had gone into the tabernacle, had gone in mirroring, emulating their teacher, but had done it without being commanded, and so lost their lives. And there's something about their names, something very powerful about their names. that might also indicate why they went in. Nadav, a beautiful modern Hebrew name, an old name, but it seems like modern Israelis are embracing that name. Nadav means a gift, an offering. Avihu, Avi, my father, who he is. They want to make a gift, an offering, to come close to Avihu, to be like their father. Which father? Not necessarily only their flesh and blood father, but also their spiritual father, their father who they have been labeled as their spiritual children. And so we have a message hidden within a story of genealogy, a list of genealogy. And I think the message is like this. And maybe I can illustrate it by a conversation I had with Yiska recently when we were driving in the car. So I was talking about my recent trip to the Ukraine to see Rav Nachman, and I was talking about some of the Torah that I've been learning from Rav Nachman, and so Yiska says, when I grow up, I want to have a chatan, a husband, just like you, Papa. I want to have a chatan who learns the same Torah as you and is interested in the same things as you. I want a chatan just like you. In actual fact, in the past, she said she's going to marry me, but we explained that that wasn't such a good idea. So I want to marry you, Daddy. You know, that's what the little girl is saying. Sometimes we can identify so much with our teachers that we don't just want to be like them, we want to be them. You also have it the other way around. Sometimes teachers want you to be them too, which is a whole different story, which isn't healthy. But it's certainly not healthy. When we learn from someone, we can emulate them. We can want to seek to emulate them so much that we lose our own sense of self. We lose our own sense of individuality. Nadav and Avihu wanted to come so close to their teacher, to Moshe. They wanted to not just emulate him, they wanted to become him. And that was the danger, and that was the problem. You see, Moshe was able to speak with Hashem. Other people also, but only when invited, only when the right conditions are met. And the Parasha Achrei Mot talks about what those conditions are. When the high priest, on the holiest day of the year, the holiest person comes in the holiest place to Hashem, there's an invitation to come in. As Rabbi Sachs likes to say, the holiest person on the holiest day in the holiest place. That's the invitation to come in. That's when you can emulate what Moshe was able to achieve, but not at other times. It wasn't invited. And we also have to recognize that too, that when we are learning from other people, the greatest thing we can do is not want to be them, but want to learn from them. Not want to be our teachers, but to aspire to the values of our teachers. And I think that's also what marks a great teacher. Is a great teacher is not the person that seeks to remake the student in their own image. In actual fact, I think that's quite abusive. I think that's a way, that's ingredients for destroying a person's individuality. I think the greatest of teachers are the ones that see the talents in their students and want those talents and those skills and all the good things that they see to be brought forth. And so we have to learn to be the right students, and we have to learn to be the right teachers. We have to learn to be the right students to see what there is to value, to emulate, to hold it up as important, and see what I can apply to my situation, to my life. Not to try and become something I'm not, but rather to try and raise myself up to who I can best be with this person as a guide. And as teachers also, we have to recognize that our mission is not to try and make everyone the same, make everyone just like us, but instead to take the values that we share, that we want to put out there, and see how this person can live those values in each of their unique way. That's, I think, the message of what could have been a very, very dry passage. So just by the way, to sum up, we've got 4 questions. Where are Moses' children? They're right here. Nadav and Avihu, the prime disciples or the prime individuals that took on the message of Moshe. They're his spiritual children. What is the relevance of the day of the giving of the Torah? Well, that's the day that this transformation happened, when they saw Moshe and they saw the light shining from him, and they wanted to achieve that light themselves. Why does it say these are the names, to stress the nadav, the avihu, the offering, that this is my father, that their names almost call out to what they were trying to achieve so desperately but so mistakenly? And why refer back to the cause of death of Nadav and Avihu? To let us know something very powerful about genealogy, to let us know something very powerful about the lessons that we can take and the lessons that we can give. Thank you very much for logging in to this week's Chasing Lullabies. More to come next week. And just a reminder that tomorrow night we've got our very own Dr. Jonathan Bahar, who's talking about his experiences at Nightingale when he was seconded there, though it's now closed. He was seconded there to and what he saw and his understanding of how Corona has affected, from a medical perspective, what Corona has, his interactions with Corona, and he'll be there to answer your questions also. And then next week, we also have the next installment of Chasing Lullabies. See the events sheet for more information about other things happening the rest of the week. I'm going to just stop the live stream, but any more questions or comments are very, very welcome. Thank you.